André, nu e o pledoarie pentru homeschooling sau unschooling, este o voce a copiilor. Suntem toți grăbiți să tragem concluzia, băi, copilul nu e interesat. Eu îmi fac lecția bine, el nu e interesat. André spune, da, nu e interesat pentru că niciun creier nu învață dacă lipsesc jocul, entuziasmul, curiozitatea.
Why did your parents choose this form of education for you?
I had no education at all, if you want to put it like this. No formal education at all. No homeschooling, unschooling. And they were not against school.
How did you learn other languages? Because you speak English, German. How did you learn these languages without being in school? How did you learn music? How did you learn to play an instrument without a teacher?
Children, and that's the biggest point here. Tell to the world something the world doesn't know or doesn't believe, knows but doesn't believe. Is that children are able to learn anything on their own, on their way, without being formally educated. Because you learned Romanian on your own, at your rhythm, in your ways. If you are free to live your enthusiasm, you will gather informations from everywhere because the world is full of information. And you will learn that and never forget it. And information needs to activate your emotional centers in order to be understood and memorized. What every child wants to hear is, I love you because you are the way you are. Our children become the way we see them. If you are able to give that to your children, and that's not in words, that's an attitude, then you give to the children the safe harbor everyone is looking for.
Părinți CuMinți cu Simona Gherghe și Oana Moraru. Un podcast ZUnivers.
Bun găsit! Suntem la Părinți CuMinți, podcastul în care învățăm să fim părinți mai buni pentru copiii noștri. Sunt Simona Gherghe, alături de mine, ca de obicei, Oana Moraru, expert în parenting și educație, autor de cărți, fondator de școală. Oana, astăzi bifăm o premieră pentru podcastul nostru, pentru că avem un invitat internațional.
Da.
Și invitatul nostru de astăzi este nimeni altul decât André Stern. Este autorul unei cărți care
A făcut înconjurul lumii.
Exact. Și iată că ajunge și la București. Și n-am mers niciodată la școală și titlul original în franceză este Je ne suis jamais allé à l'école. André Stern este omul care nu a mers niciodată la școală. Muzician, scriitor, compozitor, jurnalist și speaker motivațional. Și o poveste fabuloasă de viață pe care o să o aflăm astăzi, dar și o teorie foarte interesantă pe care o are el despre educație. André, welcome to our podcast. It's a pleasure for us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you, and are looking forward to seeing you in Romania next week.
I'm happy about that too, because
Actually, it will be this week, Oana.
Yeah.
Okay, André, you describe yourself as you were a little boy, a boy who didn't like candies, with long hair, and who never been to school. And the last part makes you a kind of exception, André. Why did your parents choose this form of education for you? Because now we are familiar with homeschooling, but 40 years ago it was something unusual, right?
it was unusual, yes, and above all, unschooling. What I had no education at all, if you want to put it like this. No formal education at all. No homeschooling, unschooling. Yes, they didn't know a lot of things that we know nowadays. I'm working with scientists. I love science. I love scientists, and since I am so busy with childhood, they send me a lot of very interesting articles and books and so on. But my parents did not have all of that. And they were not against school. They had nothing against school. They were happy children with a happy childhood and no problems with school. They had no problems in school. They didn't want their children to have. They had nothing to nothing against school. That's the beauty of it. They had nothing against something, they had something for something. They were for something, and that was pretty easy. For them it was unthinkable, impossible to wake up a child who was sleeping. For them, a child who is sleeping has a reason to be sleeping. If not, it would be awake, but it is not. So they didn't feel able to wake up a sleeping child. And in the same way, they didn't feel legitimate in interrupting a child while that child is playing. The play of a child was so important for them. They thought if the child is playing, it's out of any good reason. We do not have to interrupt that. So if you do not want to wake up a child, if you do not want to interrupt the child who is playing, if you think that's the most important thing that child can do, so you have to invent circumstances that make that possible.
But we have to say for our viewers that your parents were very highly educated people. So your father is a famous researcher and also a teacher. Did you feel that you were part of a kind of experiment or something?
No, because I was not. And you know, the fact that my parents are who they are, of course, plays a role in my life. But they could have been non-educated people and make the same choices. It's not because they were educated, because they didn't plan to educate their children. They didn't want to make their children look like them. So see, so that anyone can do that because you don't need knowledge. Your children, and that's the biggest point here. And that's one of the biggest points in my work, in my everyday job, to tell to the world something the world doesn't know or doesn't believe, knows but doesn't believe, is that children are able to learn anything, everything on their own, on their way, in their rhythm. They are able to learn anything without being taught, without being formally educated. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows it. Because you learned Romanian on your own, at your rhythm, at your pace, in your ways, following your didactic ways of learning. But you did it without any lesson. Everyone here did it without any lesson. So that's something we know, that's something we experience ourselves. So we know, and you know, now I'm working with neuroscientists and they tell us so interesting things like, for example, learning the first language, the mother tongue, is the biggest thing you will do in your whole life. You know nothing about speaking when you are a child. You do not know anything about communication, verbal communication. And you have to learn all of that, starting from scratch. And that's the biggest thing you will do with your brain your whole life. If you were able to learn your mother tongue with no lessons, then you are able to learn everything without any lessons. And my parents were not experimenting something. That was not an experiment, that was a conviction they had. And the rest of the story, we wrote it.
Yes, but for the rest of us who were all our lives instructed, yes, if we decided just to trust the kid's nature, and let's say I decide this for my kid, what would you advise a parent in the way he takes his role or his part in his child education? If he decides, well, I'll let the child free, I'll homeschool him or unschool him, what would be my part? What would be my role as a parent? Who am I next to this child? Because my instinct tells me to show him the way, to compare him, to measure him. Yeah.
You know, she's a teacher.
I'm a teacher. I'm running the school and I have this struggle all day long. What is the good balance between happiness, freedom, playfulness? Yeah.
No, there is no good balance.
No.
Because if you show the child one way, you show this child your way, but you are bringing the child away from his own way. That's the problem. But I know that's how the paradigms in our education system is. That's how the whole order of our world is based on. And your first question was, what would I advise to parents? Nothing, because I give no advices, because I don't think that there is any universal solution good for everyone. I think that only you can know what is good for your constellation, knowing all the subtle differences and nuances that are in your lives, from you, your family, your children, your environment, your stories, everything.
So I really need to trust. Yeah.
Yeah, but trust is my thing. That's now the first of my books is being published in Romania. That's wonderful. I have written other books. The last of my books is about trust. But trust is not something you should do, because if it's something that should happen to you, because you cannot force it. If you, out of many reasons. The first of the reasons is if I say to you that you are not in trust, but you should be, it means it would be better if you are another you as the you are. And that's nothing you want to hear. That's something we hear as children from the beginning. That you are not good as you are, you have to improve yourself, you have to change in order to be lovable, That's something that begins very early in our lives, when our parents are first-time parents, You know how fragile, how complicated it is to be young parents. You are so exhausted and so much love, but so much tiredness, and it's forever like that. Nothing will be like before, and so on. And people come and ask you. You know what people ask? They ask, "Oh, does your child sleep all night?"
Yes.
And people asking that did have children, and their children didn't sleep all night, because a child who sleeps through the night doesn't exist. But they ask, and you as a young parent, you are in front of that question, and you think, okay, it's important. If everyone asks, grandparents, parents, people I don't know in the bus, or the driver of the cab driver, the taxi driver, everyone asks, does my child sleep through the night? And my child doesn't, so my child has a problem. I have a problem. And then we meet our children, telling them in the non-verbal part of speaking what children understand best. I would love you more if you would sleep more. And it means, like you are, the way you are now, is not so good as it could be if you would change. And that's the wonder child we all carry in us, because it doesn't stop. I love you, but I would love you more if you would help me at home. I love you, but I would love you more if you bring better quotes home. I love you, but I will... And that doesn't stop our whole life. And we get used to it. And if I tell you you are not in trust, you should be, then it's the same. I tell you you are not so good, such a good person now, you would be better if you would be... But where does trust come from? It comes from information. Nowadays, we miss a lot of informations about childhood. My job is to give those informations. And when you have those informations, you are in a position of trust, and then you are able to make a choice for yourself and your family, but you need those informations. As long as the old informations circulate, we do not have any possibility of being in trust. And to answer your first question, what every child wanted to hear is not, I love you, but I would love you more if. What every child wants to hear is, I love you because you are the way you are. And that is unconditional trust. And there is no unconditional love without unconditional trust. I love you because you are the way you are. If you are able to give that to your children, and that's not in words, that's an attitude, That's not a method, that's an attitude. That's not a comparison between methods, that is an attitude. If you can give that attitude, if through your attitude you can give to the child this land of I love you because you are the way you are, then you give to the children the safe harbor everyone is looking for. And when children have that safe harbor, you can go into pedagogical holidays, because you already done everything your children are expecting from you, and the rest of the story they can write themselves based on that absolutely necessary ground they need, your unconditional trust. But again, that trust doesn't appear from itself only because I tell you to be in trust. You need informations.
And also, as you say, attitude. And what Juana used to say almost every episode, the way we look at our children, the look of love, we fill them with love without criticizing them through the eyes, that look. But you said, you make this comparison, the way children learn the maternal language, yeah? How did you learn other languages? Because you speak English, German, maybe French. French is your native, yeah, maybe Italian. How did you learn these languages without being in school? How did you learn music? How did you learn to play an instrument without a teacher?
I mean, was there any discipline? Was there a program you had to follow? How
schedule.
Did you, how did discipline come into your life? Because this is the question all parents ask me. Well, if we leave them be themselves, where does discipline come in? When will my kid know what's right or wrong? Am I supposed to be there when they're playing? Yeah, I know, but this is what parents spiral into. When we advocate for just playfulness and enthusiasm, all the other questions come tumbling down like, oh no, he will just go crazy. They will fight on the playground. They will not know what their life is supposed to be.
They will learn nothing.
They'll learn nothing.
Yeah, that's all the old story. That's all the old attitude. Attitude of not trusting. And there are thousands of such questions, and I was confronted to all those questions, and that's such a blessing because I had to think over. I had to dive and to understand the questions and the reasons why those questions are asked. And I understand deeply every person who asks all those questions. First of all, you began as a sentence in the first minute, in the first second. That is for me one of the keys. One of the keys is following sentence. That's the conclusion of everything I have learned and seen and studied in the last years, in the last 20 years. Our children become the way we see them. I don't know if you see the weight of that fact. Our children become the way we see them. If we see them as something little, that will never be able to learn anything, that needs our guidance to become something, then our children will become like that. If we see our children for what they are, for giants, that's what they will become. It all depends on the way we see them. There are a lot of scientific reasons why that happens. We have no time now. You have to trust me on that, or to come to the conference we will do we'll make in a few days in Bucharest.
In 25.
Or you read those books.
Of November.
We have only a short amount of time, so I will try to explain it in that short amount of time. Why, for example, see our children as giants? Because they are giants. We have no reasons, because all our paradigmas shows us the child as a little thing that has to become, that has to learn to become something, and we are the ones in charge of that. And that's a lot of pressure for them and for us as parents, of course. And all that pressure is a problem for everyone, for the children or for the parents. Look, I give you some examples of those informations, what I'm telling about, that could answer some of the questions, and I will try to answer the personal questions then. Why are, for example, children giants? It's interesting. The genetic programs that are making us, the genetic programs are the same since thousands of years. 22,000 years ago, on the ice, that were the same programs. In 200 years, in any desert somewhere on the earth, dry and hot, the same programs. They're making us. They have no idea what they had to prepare us for, which potentials we need to develop in order to survive in our environment. They don't know if it is 22,000 years ago or in 200 years. They don't know that. So how do we solve the problem? There is only one way to solve that problem, is to equip any human being coming to the world with all possible potentials of human beings. It means when you come to the world, when you are born with all possibilities. You have the possibilities of becoming whatever humans can become, and of learning whatever humans can learn. And that's the only solution, because wherever you are in the world, in that big, immense amount of potentials, there are those potentials that you need to survive in your environment. So a child who comes to the world is genetically prepared to become everything and to learn everything. There is nothing a child cannot learn, and there is nothing a child cannot become. So that is one first step in the world of trust. Because if you know that, then you see that everything is possible, because everything is there from the beginning. Of course, there is a development, because we cannot develop thousands and thousands and thousands of potentials. We have to develop those which are relevant in our environment, and the others, they go aside and let the important one come through. So in the end, there is only a little remain of those potentials, so that's a little quantity, and that's an adult person. So a child can become everything if you know that. You are in a new attitude, because you know there is nothing a child cannot learn. And you learn your own mother tongue the way you did. And people often ask me, how did you learn to write, to read, to mathematics, and so on? And I don't know. It just happened. I know you don't believe me, but I don't know.
Maybe you were a prodigy child.
Just the contrary. As long as you believe that I am an exception, and that is not relevant for other children, and that's precisely wrong. I am a child like every other child. Every child does that. I give you one example. For my son, Antonin, already 14 years old. It's incredible. I don't know how that happened. Antonin certainly spoke English. I don't speak English. I'm trying to. I'm working on it. I speak German and French. English is a big mess for me, but I like it. He loves it. One morning, I tell you, I know you won't believe me. And as long as you don't believe me, it's because of missing information. One morning, he spoke English. He spoke English so well that English people do not notice that English is not his mother tongue. And I asked him, where did you learn that? He said, I don't know. And that's the only real answer. He doesn't know. He loves it. He lived the life he lives, gathering all information, and suddenly he can't speak English. I know we won't believe it, but it's the way children
Yeah,
learn.
now I was wondering, maybe in kindergarten, maybe from YouTube, maybe from television, from
all
other
of that.
children.
You know, the one more reason of being interest is that superpower we have, our ability to get enthusiastic about things. Enthusiasm is one of the titles of one of my books. Enthusiasm is that superpower that makes us able to read, to do, to learn everything. That's not the same as joy. You know, joy is something that stops where difficulties begin. Enthusiasm brings us through difficulties, you know, brings us further over difficulties. Enthusiasm is what gives us wings. Enthusiasm is what makes us geniuses and makes us useful to the world, you know. And if you are enthusiastic about something, if no one interrupts you, if no one says, look, your enthusiasm for, I don't know, dinosaurs is not so important as your as our enthusiasm for mathematics, for example, it stops your enthusiasm. But if you are free to live your enthusiasm, you will gather information from everywhere because the world is full of information. And you will learn that and never forget it. Let's speak about learning. Do we still have 1 minute?
Yes.
Because my invitation here is to try to give you reasons why to trust. You know, we have that obsession with learning. We want children to learn. We prepare everything in order they learn. We want them to learn, and we don't know anything about learning. How does learning work? And we have a big misunderstanding because we make a big mistake as a whole society. We make one big mistake. We mix things that have nothing to do with each other. We mix learning with learning by heart. That's not the same thing. Learning by heart is accumulating things you know. Learning is something else. And learning doesn't work because our brain is not made for learning. It's not optimized for learning. Did you know that? Our brain is not optimized for learning, for memorizing informations. Our brain is optimized to solve problems. And if we are looking for solutions, and we meet any piece of information that is able to help us solve our problem, the problem that is important to us, if we meet some piece of information, then we understand that information and we memorize that information immediately, forever. That's learning. Learning by heart doesn't work out of following reason. An information needs to activate your emotional centers in order to be understood and memorized. If an information do not touch you, does not concern you directly, if you are not really interested in that information, it doesn't activate your emotional centers, and the information goes through one ear in and through the other ear out.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? Do you remember that? Doesn't it
Sure.
ring a bell? You know, 80% from everything you have had to learn by heart,
You forget.
you forgot.
Yeah.
And we had to make it acceptable because our whole society wouldn't accept it if we wouldn't make it acceptable. You can nowadays say to everyone, look, yes, I have learned that in school, but I have forgotten it. And everyone will say, yes, so did I.
That's normal.
That's normal.
We all
And
agree
had to
this
make
is
it
normal. Dysfunctional is
Yes.
normal already. Yeah, I know.
Yes,
Sure.
you think of the 20% you didn't forget. That were the 20% that touched you, that were concerning you, where the person touched you. You were in a state of activated emotional centers. And that's the reason why you understood the information. You have to understand an information to memorize it, and it happens automatically. It's the reason why I say that learning is nothing that we do. Learning is something that happens to us. And now, one last point. Do you know how to activate those emotional centers from outside? Because if you know how to activate those centers from outside, you are the king of the world, of the educational world. But there is no way. No substance, no practice, nothing. There is one activity. One single activity that activates our emotional centers. And that is playing. Mm-hmm. And look, the only thing children would do if we wouldn't interrupt them, and that's the information my parents didn't have, but they felt it. The only activity that brings us into the state in which we are able to understand and memorize every information we meet, that state of mind is activated by playing, and playing is the thing every child wants to do and would do all day if we wouldn't interrupt them. That's a big piece of information.
Well, as a teacher, I noticed that if I entered the classroom with a sense of, well, I love what I'm doing, I'm very curious about what I'm teaching, I'm curious myself, I'm very enthusiastic, I'm convinced that this is a very good thing, this is a kind of like close way to manipulate kids into mimicking your energy and getting interested in what I'm teaching, because I have a curriculum, I have to go forward like I planned. But I was wondering, what do you think about the kids who live in dysfunctional families or in poor places where they don't get good influence from their peers or their parents? Isn't school like the only chance for them, the place where they can meet people who can give them some kind of structure in their life or some kind of, warm feeling about themselves if they come from very dysfunctional families or...
Look, I said nowhere that
that school is,
school.
yeah, I see.
Yeah. You know, I think there is no one unique solution, and if you do what I did, you will not be happy. That's for sure. And I have nothing to sell, and I have nothing to criticize. I have information to give in order everyone chooses the way for themselves, you know. And of course, school can be a blessing for a lot of people. But what if school would be a blessing for everyone because we change everything in our attitude, you know?
Yeah.
Because of children in difficult situations, what about the others that are not in difficult situations, you know?
And they're still forced to follow a path.
Yes, and you know, I think the future of education is not possible without the future of us knowing what childhood is. Mm-hmm. We don't know why, because children are always missed in our discussions about education. We never ask children. And I am ambassador for children, you know, and that's important for me because I am the only one, and I'm sorry about that, I am the only one carrying the voices of our children into the world where we are trying to make a world for them. There is a lot to say. I remember you asked, what about discipline? Mm-hmm. And discipline, for example, is not needed where there is enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. We need discipline and effort where we have no enthusiasm to force ourselves, you know? Where you have enthusiasm, there is no need for discipline because you want to do what makes you enthusiastic. And you know, we do not know something. One of my books is about rhythms and rituals. We think if we give children freedom and trust, there will be chaos. They will do anything and everything will be chaotic. But who has a direct experience of what happens when we trust, when we give trust and freedom to our children? No one. You know, we have preconceptions, ideas that we took from others. Own experiences of that has no one. For example, do you know, there are many questions I am the only one able to answer, and that's a pity. And I'm not proud about this because I didn't invent anything, you know, it's something that happened to me. But for example, I am the only one able to answer the question, what happens to a child that was not interrupted in his playing for 52 years? I am the only one having direct experience of that. Everyone has an idea about it, but not a direct experience, you know? And And what we don't know is if we have trust, if we give to our children trust and freedom, that's what appears is not chaos. There are very strong rituals and very strong rhythms. And that gives us structure. And without that structure, you cannot have freedom. Children want freedom. And they want that structure that gives them that freedom. And the structure are those strong rituals and those strong rhythms that the whole world have and that they have, they own. But once more, how do we trust in those rituals and rhythms if we don't have those informations?
If you have other questions for André Stern, he will be in Bucharest on November 25 when he will launch his book. Și n-am mers niciodată la școală. André, thank you so much, and we are looking forward to seeing you here in Bucharest. And we hope you like Romania and also the Romanians.
I'm pretty sure of that. I'm looking forward to see you in real life and to see all of you. And thank you for that opportunity. That's my first interview in Romania, so it's always important in life. Thank you for being tolerant with my English. And welcome on the side of the mirror where the trust is, because every minute we live on that side of the mirror is a blessing for childhood and humanity. So thank you.
Thank you. I think
André.
we need your message here in Romania. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Da, o perspectivă interesantă, Oana, de asemenea o poveste foarte interesantă de viață. El, într-adevăr, este o excepție, dacă e să ne gândim la tot parcursul pe care l-a avut în acești 40 și ceva de ani.
Da, doar că eu urmărindu-l și ascultându-l de mai mult timp, am observat ce spune și e important pentru cei care au ascultat 30 de minute și care s-au, wow, ce e asta, cum adică nu... El spune clar, nu vreau să vând ideea că gata, de mâine nu mai mergem la școală. Eu spun doar că în educația mea, asta liberă pe care mi-au lăsat-o părinții, ingredientul ăsta de curiozitate, joacă, libertate, entuziasm, m-au dus mai departe și m-au dus la un punct în care eu în viața mea de adult nu simt presiunea asta a sistemului. Eu amestec joaca, serviciul, bucuria, proiectele ca și cum sunt parte din mine, nu separate. André, nu e o pledoarie pentru homeschooling sau unschooling, este o voce a copiilor pe care încerc și eu să o aduc profesorilor cât mai des la întâlniri. Apropo de ingredientul ăla care ne lipsește tuturor în oră, pentru că suntem toți grăbiți să facem programa, să trecem prin materie și suntem toți grăbiți să tragem concluzia, băi, copilul nu e interesat. Eu îmi fac lecția bine, el nu e interesat. André spune, da, nu e interesat pentru că niciun creier nu învață dacă lipsesc jocul, entuziasmul și curiozitatea. Și cred că el este un exemplu pe care trebuie să-l aducem și mă bucur că vine în România părinților încordați, care cred că copiii trebuie întotdeauna verificați, controlați, că altfel o iau razna. Nu e numai el exemplu, sunt mulți oameni în lume care nu vorbesc despre asta, despre cum părinților au avut încredere în natură și în forța copilăriei de a-și căuta interese. Sunt și pedagogii care merg în direcția asta, care slăvesc, să zicem, interesul copilului, doar că aici, în Europa de Est, unde e în ADN-ul nostru să ne temem, să ne comparăm, să ne autocontrolăm, să dăm bine, să creștem pe scara promovării sociale și așa, ne e foarte greu să avem încrederea asta că în fiecare copil există un GPS intern. E important să-l auzim cât putem de des ca să înțelegem, să nu o luăm prea razna în direcția asta a controlului și a
Dar știi că mi-amintesc că unul dintre cele mai de succes episoade ale podcastului nostru a fost acela în care tu ai vorbit despre natura băieților și despre cum vede școala românească integrarea lor și cât de dificil este lor, de pildă, să stea în bănci. Pentru că firea lor
e să se miște, să cațăre, să alerge și vrei, nu vrei, în școală trebuie să-i potolești, da? Pentru că se pot întâmpla accidente pe holuri, în curte. Deci să zicem, prioritatea instituțională e cea care strivește prioritatea naturii umane. Și atunci eu, ca părinte, în societatea de astăzi, măcar asta trebuie să fiu foarte conștient, că un copil instituționalizat, școlarizat, pe lângă lucrurile bune și frumoase pe care le promite o școală, este și un copil care pierde din nevoile naturale care duc la o bună dezvoltare. Faptul că e oprit, că e șușuit, că e aliniat. Lucruri foarte importante pentru dezvoltarea socială a noastră. Dar la un moment dat, astea devin foarte apăsătoare dacă în egală măsură nu îi se respectă copilului dreptul de a se juca liber, de a striga, de a urla, de a scoate din sistem, de a descărca, de a se cățăra, de a se murdări. Nu mai facem asta în mediile urbane sau suntem în școlile astea de câteva ore pe zi, în sistemul public, unde profesorii predau pe repede înainte, simt că își fac treaba fiindcă au explicat frumos, dacă au făcut-o, dar puțin dintre noi ne mai punem întrebarea ce se întâmplă cu natura umană, cine e copilul ăsta, ce preocupări are, ce simte el, ce nevoie are ca specie, dincolo de ce m-am educat eu. Și cred că a zis un lucru extraordinar la început, a spus lucrul ăsta că fiecare dintre noi din secunda în care se naște copilul nostru inducem în el sentimentul că trebuie să-și corecteze comportamente și pe sine dacă vrea iubire mai multă sau dacă noi suntem mulțumiți și el trebuie să se simtă bine. Deci condiționarea asta pe care o primim toți din prima zi de naștere, despre ce bine ar fi dacă copilul meu ar dormi mai bine, plânge noaptea înseamnă că are o problemă, înseamnă că trebuie să-l verific. Să-l repar. Încep atât de devreme și atât de subtil că la un moment dat când ajung la școală s-au rostogolit deja atâtea prejudecăți despre ce înseamnă evoluția lui că nu ne mai dăm seama cum ridicăm sprânceana că, nu știu, a luat minus FB și cât abuzi acolo în teama noastră că el nu e bine. Și ce au nevoie părinții să audă este că noi jucăm cu sistemul. Școala e un sistem de referință, dar nu e singurul. Este un sistem oarecare despre cum ajunge copilul tău să-și găsească job după ce termină facultatea. Dar există o mulțime de alte modele de succes și împlinire socio-emoțională nepromise de școală.
Să rămânem așadar cu cartea lui André, pe care în curând, în doar câteva zile, o să puteți să o găsiți și în România și, dacă vă face plăcere, să mergeți să-l întâlniți pe 25 noiembrie. Oana, mulțumesc foarte mult, dar înainte de asta, darul de la prietenii noștri de la Câte în lună și în stele o să meargă astăzi la tine și prin tine.
Primești și eu
nu știu, la cel mai jucăuș, poate elev al tău?
Da, cel mai năzdrăvan și cel mai jucăuș, cel de care se plânge toată lumea în curtea școlii.
Exact,
o să primească
și din partea prietenilor
de
la Câte în lună și în stele. Mulțumim foarte mult, vă mulțumim și vouă și ne vedem ca de obicei săptămâna viitoare la Părinți cu Minți.
ZUnivers Podcasts.